What's up everybody, welcome back or to the channel. So today we're going to be doing some general maintenance on my 2015 Harley Davidson Road King. Now what we're going to be doing today is changing all of our fluids. We're going to change the oil, replace the oil filter. We're also going to be changing out the primary case fluid and the transmission fluid. So we're going to take care of all that. And while I have the primary cover taken off, we're going to go ahead and adjust our clutch as well, because I noticed a little bit of slippage in my clutch when I'm hitting the high end of, say, second gear and really laying into that throttle on third and fourth gear. So because I notice a little bit of slippage, and what I mean by slippage, I mean I can sense that the RPMs are going up, but my rear wheel power is not aligned with the RPM as it's raising. So I assume I just need to make a clutch adjustment. Worst case scenario, I might have to replace the clutch plates, but I don't think that's going to be the case because this bike only has around 6,000 miles on it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So without further ado, let's jump in and get this tackled. Okay, so some of the things we're going to be using today, I do have a new K&N Oil Filter here we're going to be using. I do have some new O-rings here for the oil plug, so we'll put that aside. I did stop at the Harley dealership and I got 1 gallon of this Harley Davidson 20W50 for the oil, and I grabbed a couple quarts of the transmission and primary case fluid as well. So we're going to be taking care of all of that. And again, while I have this primary cover here taken off, we're going to go ahead and do a clutch adjustment too, just to see if that's going to fix my slippage issue that I've noticed. So the first thing we're going to probably tackle is the oil. So I do have a oil pan over here. So I think it'll fit under here. If it doesn't, I have another plastic container I can pour the oil in. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. Now, you want to make sure the bike is warm, but not super hot. And then when you climb under here, what you're looking for, it's this one right here we're going to be taking off. That'll drain the oil. And then up here is where your oil fill is going to be. So what we're going to do is go ahead and loosen this one up here first, like this. I just like to loosen them so it helps the oil drain out faster. So we'll just sit it there like that. Then we'll go ahead, pull that plug out right here. It's the one on the right, because you'll see this one here. We don't want to take that one out. We're doing the one on the right. That'll be for the oil. Once we drain all the oil out, we'll inspect the plug. We'll clean the plug off. We'll put a new O-ring on it. We'll put the plug back in, and then we'll go ahead and fill our oil back up right here. And we'll just use a funnel for that. So I believe on this 2015 Road King, I don't have the specs in front of me. It's a little over 3 quarts, I believe, for oil. So what I'll probably do is I'll put 3 quarts in first, put everything in, set the bike upright. Start the bike, let the bike cycle, shut the bike off, check the dipstick, and then I'll pour a little bit more oil in as needed to get it to the proper height on my dipstick here. Because when you take it out, you want to make sure that it's to the proper fill line. So we're going to go ahead and start on that first. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead under here. I have a little pan here because my big oil pan doesn't fit. So I'm just going to use this pan first, and then I can dump any excess oil from this pan into my oil pan. And then I just have my wrench here. It's probably a little bit easier to use the wrench because I have the camera under here as well, and I'm very limited on hand space. So we're going to go ahead and loosen up this bolt here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just gently loosen that until some oil starts coming out, and then we'll pull the plug. Okay, almost there. Okay. All right, we're good. So we're gonna go ahead and let that drain into the pan. Now, while that's draining, we're gonna go ahead and just take a close look at our oil plug. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this plug off a little bit, wipe it off with a rag. So right there is that black O-ring we're gonna remove and replace it with a new one. And then once everything's completely drained, we're gonna put the plug back in, and then we're gonna fill up our oil on the top. So again, very simple and easy. I mean, you don't have to take this to a dealership to do. The purpose of me showing you this is just to show you that anybody can do this. It's very easy and it's much cheaper to do it yourself. So let's go ahead and let the oil continue to drain out, and we'll be right back. So what you want to do is just get like a razor blade, or you could take a small little screwdriver and just get this rubber O-ring off. Okay, just like that. So wipe everything down. Okay, and then you can just go online. I think I ordered this whole set online of 10 black replacement O-rings. I mean, these are not expensive. I would always recommend getting them and having some on stock because you just never know when you're gonna need them. And it's definitely worth just replacing and not taking the chance on assuming that your existing one is still in good shape. So just replace it when you do your oil. Okay, and we're just gonna go ahead, slide the new ring on. And then there is a groove at the bottom. You wanna make sure it gets down in, okay? All right, so it's on there and we're good. Okay, so now that we have our plug cleaned with a new O-ring, now we're just gonna wait for the oil to finish draining, and then we're gonna go ahead and put our plug back in and tighten it nice and snug. You don't have to over tighten it and manhandle it. Don't do that. Just make it nice and snug and you should be good to go. Okay, so now that we got the oil drained and we got the plug put back in the bottom with a new O-ring, that's good to go. Now what we gotta do is go ahead and swap out our oil filter. Now this is an aftermarket oil filter, so it has this wrench adjustment on the back, so I could pretty much just use a wrench to take that off because I don't have one of those Harley wrenches that grips the whole back of the filter. But if you have a factory Harley Davidson filter, you would need a special wrench that grips the back of that filter to take it off because it's a very tight space to get in there with tools. That's why I like these aftermarket filters, because even like this one right here, it has the wrench adapter on the back to take it off. Now you never want to wrench it on. You want to hand tighten it on, but having a wrench option to take it off makes things a lot easier. Now keep in mind, you are going to have oil dripping out of here. There's really just no way around it, but I like to still try to squeeze a small pan underneath to catch any excess oil that is going to drip down, and we'll just have to wipe it off later. So again, what's gonna happen is once it starts dripping, I'm gonna just try to take this oil filter out as quickly as I possibly can. Let's see if I can get you some light down here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is just try to get this thing out of here as quickly as possible, but we are going to drip oil. It's kind of hard to get around that. It's dripping already. Okay. So we're good to go there. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and open up our new filter. Okay, brand new out of the box, like so. Okay, take off all the plastic. Okay, so we are good to go. Grab a little bit of oil with our finger. Just wipe off this ring to give it a nice smooth seal when you're screwing it back down. Okay, let's get and put it back in there. Okay, so we're good to go there. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a glove on to get a little bit of a better grip, and then I'm just going to hand tighten that filter on. Once it's hand tight, we're gonna go ahead and fill our oil up on the opposite side, and we'll be right back. So now we just have to fill it back up with new fresh oil. So let's go ahead, pull our dipstick out. Okay, we're gonna sit that down on a paper towel. Put a funnel in. Now this gallon that I got here from the Harley shop, so I'm gonna pour it down until I basically have 1 quart left, and then I'll make final adjustments to how much more I need to put in there based on what the dipstick is telling me. So let me go ahead and fill that up and we'll be right back. Okay, so I just went ahead and I filled up, as you can see here, just about 3 quarts, maybe slightly less. So what we're gonna do here is then put our dipstick back in. Okay, we're gonna wipe off our dipstick here. So let's go ahead and put our plug back in. It is on the Jiffy stand here already. So let that sit in there for a second here. if you can kind of tell, but we're pretty much right at the full line here. I might add a tiny bit more, but I'd say we're pretty good at this point. Okay, so I went ahead and I dumped the old oil into my excess oil pan here. And we have the new filter on, and we filled up the oil. I started the bike just for a couple seconds to go ahead and let the oil kind of cycle, fill up the oil filter and everything. And I put a little bit more oil back in there. So as you can see here, if we just kind of take a close look at this, you can see I'm probably right about where I need to be, because again, you need a little over 3 quarts. I think it's like 3.3 quarts. So we should be good for now. But I have a little excess left over, so after running the bike for a few days, if I need to top it off, I can. So now we are done with the oil. Next, we're gonna move on to the transmission, which again, it'll be on this right side of the bike, pretty simple. What we're gonna have to do here, remember, that's where the oil plug was, right here. You come right over here, and I can't get my camera under here, but right there in the frame opening here, there is your transmission fluid plug. So the same thing, we just got to loosen that up, put the pan underneath it here, drain out the transmission fluid, wipe off the plug, put a new O-ring on it, put it back in, and then we'll fill it up with 1 quart of new transmission fluid. So let me do that, we'll be right back. We're just going to go ahead and loosen up our cap for the transmission here. Again, I'm just loosening the cap up, okay? I'm not taking it fully out, I'm just loosening it up, because again, by loosening your cap, it'll help drain the fluid out better. So if we come back under the bottom here, same thing like we did on the oil. Loosen this up. There we go. Okay, so we got the transmission plug out. So you just basically want to inspect it, see if you see any like metal shavings. I don't really see any major issues here. I don't see a whole lot of metal shavings, because a lot of metal shavings can mean you have definitely some transmission issues, but overall it doesn't look too bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this plug off. I'm gonna put a new O-ring on it. We're gonna let that drain. Once it's done draining, put our new plug in, fill it back up with a new quart of fresh transmission fluid, and then we can move on to the primary case. So let's let that finish draining. Let me go clean this up and we'll be right back. Okay, I think we're pretty much done draining. We're down to pretty much a nice slow drip. So I'm gonna try to move this out of the way a little bit and get up there with my rag. Just trying to wipe some of that off, because the wind blows into the garage and just kind of blows it. So I can just get that wiped off a little bit in there. Okay. Out of the way. Start threading that in. Good to go there. All right, now I'm using a different funnel this time. So I try to keep the funnel that I use for the actual oil separate from the transmission fluid. Wipe that off, set that to the side. Got a new funnel here. And again, we're gonna pour in 1 quart of the transmission fluid over here. Now again, you wanna make sure you follow the specs of your specific bike as to how many quarts you need. But typically 1 quart of transmission, 1 quart in the primary, and about 3 1/3 quart of oil is what my bike typically takes. And again, you don't have to always, and again, I tend to use the Harley Davidson branded oil and transmission fluid, because when comparing the prices at Harley to the prices at, say, Walmart, they're both about $8 a quart. So if I'm gonna spend $8 a quart, I'd rather just use the Harley Davidson branded oil, because that's what the bike came with. So you can use whatever you want. There's more expensive synthetic fluids out there. So if you wanna use that, you can, but I just use the Harley Davidson brand. Okay, good to go there. Wipe that off a little bit. Okay. Put our plug back in. And we should be good on the transmission side. Next, we're gonna do the primary case, which is pretty simple. Now, if you have pegs in the back, they should be fine. If you have floorboards in the back like me, you're gonna have to take your floorboard off by just removing this 1 bolt here. take your floorboard off because the floorboard blocks your primary cover here. We got to take that primary cover off. Now, the tricky part of this is we have to get the bike level. So I'm going to try to use my motorcycle jack over here from the right side, just enough to where I can get the bike to come up level, because you want to have the bike level when taking the primary cover off so that your primary fluid is not draining out. So you need the bike level for this. So let me work on that and I'll be right back. Okay, so we went ahead and I got the bike jacked up on the motorcycle jack, and I pushed the jack in from the right side so that the jack was not just sitting here on the left side where I need to be working. And I pushed it just under enough to get under the frame, but it still cleared the drain valve for the primary, so that worked out great. So I have my cardboard down here, I have my little drain bucket here, and then right under here, right there, that's gonna be your drain for the primary case. So once we pull the plug out, we're gonna inspect it, we're gonna wipe it down, we're gonna put a new O-ring on it. We're gonna let all that primary fluid drain out into our pan. Once it's all done draining, we're gonna put our plug back in. Then what we're gonna do is just take these 5 Torx bit bolts out, take that primary cover off. Hopefully the gasket underneath is still in good condition, and then I could just reuse it because I don't have a spare with me right now. But again, if it's not, we'll just go ahead and put the primary on for now, and then I'll just have to stop by the Harley shop tomorrow and pick up a new one. But hopefully the gasket's okay. But once we actually remove this cover and have drained it and plugged it and good to go, we'll put another quart of brand new fresh fluid in through here using a funnel. And while it's sitting up and exposed, we're gonna go ahead and adjust our clutch lever. So let me start working on this and we'll be right back. Okay, so we took the cover off, we took our gasket off, and that actually does help drain the fluid a little faster. So that's pretty much just dripping now, so we're pretty close to being done draining that. And we inspected the gasket, and this gasket seems to be perfectly fine. So we're good with that, that's good news. So now is a good time to get in here and just kind of inspect everything. So we should be pretty good there. This fluid definitely needed changed. It's pretty funky right now, but we're gonna go ahead and do that here in a minute. So I'm gonna let this drip a couple more seconds, and then once that's done, we're gonna go ahead and clean off our primary plug, clean it off, wipe it down, put a new O-ring on, and get that back installed. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and put another quart of the primary fluid directly right in here, just using a funnel, and we'll be good to go there. And then at that point, all of our fluids should be done. And then once that is done, then we're gonna start tackling adjusting our clutch. So let me go ahead and get that plugged, and we'll be back here in a minute. Okay, so we got everything done. Now we're just gonna take our funnel, just kind of drop it into here a little bit. If you have a smaller one, that always works really good, but this works good. And we're just gonna basically pour it down in there. Look how nice and clean that is. You don't want to put too much fluid in here and soak your chain. You're not giving your chain a bath. You just want the fluid to come up to the bottom of the chain so that the chain is gently soaking itself a little bit as it's running through the fluid. But you don't want to overfill this and soak it. So we got that done. So now we are good to go. I'm just gonna get him wipe this off a little bit. Any excess that might have fell out of there. Okay, so now we're good. Okay, so now that we have all of our fluids changed, everything's good to go. Now, since we have the primary cover off anyways, I would just recommend just doing a quick clutch adjustment. Now, the main reason I am adjusting my clutch today is because I've noticed a little bit of slippage. Okay, so to do this, it's fairly simple. All we're gonna do is slide down our boot. You're just gonna kind of roll it down. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is take the slack off of your clutch. So once you've actually moved your rubber boot all the way down and exposed your clutch adjustment, there's a top nut right here. So the first thing you want to do is basically loosen up this top nut, because once you loosen up this top nut, we need to move the big long adjustment nut all the way up to the top. That'll give us all the slack. Now, your long nut might be shaped slightly different. This one here is completely round all the way down towards the bottom, but at the very bottom, there's a space to put a wrench to hold it in place. Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead. Okay. So loosen up your nut all the way up here like that. Then we're gonna go ahead and take this nut here and pull it all the way up to the top. You want this big nut to come all the way up to the very top. Because what we're doing is taking off all of the tension off of our clutch. So when we go up to the handle, it should be able to pull very loosely. Okay, so now that we're pretty much up to the top, we want all of the tension to be taken out of this top clutch handle here, which it is. So to get this adjusted, you want to put an Allen wrench into the actual bolt here, and then we got to break our back nut. Okay, so to get this nut loosened up, you're going to take your Allen wrench, put it in here to hold that from spinning, and take your wrench and just get in here and just kind of loosen that nut, okay? What you want to do then, once you get this nut loosened, is back it off a little bit, just like that. Now what we're going to do, now this is the key to feeling this. So once you've loosened up your tension nut here, you're going to get used to just feeling what this main bolt feels like, okay? Over here, there's no tension. As it stops about right here, that's pretty much where I'm bottoming out. That means that the bolt here is hitting the back plate. So once you get that tension, you don't want to completely tighten it down, okay? So right here, I'd say if we're looking at this as a clock, this is probably like my 5 o'clock position, something like that, pretty close. So the rule of thumb is, once you find your tension point, which I'd say is about right here, right about 5 o'clock. I think the general rule of thumb is a half a turn back. Some people say 3/4 of a turn. It's really up to you, but I'm gonna try a half a turn, maybe slightly past. My tension is about 5 o'clock. I'm gonna come up to about here, which is a half a turn back. Once it's there, go ahead and tighten your nut down like that. You can go ahead, tighten it back up. You don't have to go crazy with this. Okay, we should be good. So now that we got that done, we're gonna come back over here to our clutch adjustment. And then you wanna make sure you go to the top and make sure your cable is seated in place right here. You don't want it like flopping out. Come down over here and adjust the tension adjustment nut down. And you want to keep adjusting it until you have about 1/8 of an inch of play in your clutch lever. So we're going to bring this down and we're going to come back up to the top. So there's still too much play here. So we're going to come back down and keep tightening it up. And this is very simple. It just takes a little finesse. Just keep reaching back up and feeling where the tension is on your lever. I'm gonna go a little bit more. It's a little bit too tight. Back it off a little bit. Okay, so this is what I mean. You wanna come up here and you wanna be able to feel about 1/8 of an inch of play. Okay. Now again, I don't have any way of measuring this. This is just about going by feel. Because if you have this lever too tight and there's no play, that could mean that your clutch is not fully engaging once you've actually put it in gear and let go of the clutch. If it doesn't have play like this, it could basically have a little bit of tension on that clutch and it's not fully engaging, which could be causing some of your slipping. So I'd say that feels pretty good right there. And we should be good. So now what we're gonna do is, now that we have our position figured out, we're gonna take our top nut, screw it down. Take your wrenches again. So then what you wanna do is just take your wrench, tighten that top nut down. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to overly muscle this. Okay, we should be good. Then, go ahead, pull your rubber boot back up. Okay. So just to recap everything on the primary, we took the primary cover off. We inspected the gasket. We pulled the drain plug out the bottom. We drained all the fluid. We did a visual inspection inside. Everything looked good. We then loosened the clutch adjustment over here to its loosest setting. Then we went back over here, put an Allen wrench in the center bolt, loosened the jam nut that's around the bolt. We went back and forth to find our tension point, which mine on my Allen wrench was right about 5 o'clock. I went back about a half a turn, tightened the jam nut, tightened everything down, put our boot back on. Now we just gotta put our primary cover and gasket back on, and we are done. Okay, so we got the primary cover put back on. Again, you just wanna make sure, if you can, follow the torque specs on each one of these bolts, because you do not wanna over tighten these bolts. They don't require a lot of torque, so just make sure you look at the torque specs for your specific vehicle. I don't have a torque wrench this small, so I just do like a nice snug, but I don't over crank it. As soon as it starts to feel nice and snug, maybe just a tiny little bit more than snug, and I leave it at that, and it seems to be perfectly fine. You never want to over tighten these. I do recommend using a torque wrench if you have one, but again, I don't, so I just kind of rely on feel. But we are done with that. So next, we just got to put our rear floorboard back on, and we should be good to go. So let me do that. We'll be right back. Okay, so we are all done. We got our passenger floorboard put back on. I went back over some of the areas with a nice detailing rag and cleaned it up just to make sure there was no excess oils laying around. So I tried to do my best on that. So let's go ahead and turn it over. Okay, we're in neutral. Okay, so I like to just let the bike run for a couple minutes just to get the oil flowing, get the transmission fluid flowing, and get the primary fluids flowing around. So I'm just gonna go ahead and let that idle for about a minute or so, and then I'm gonna go ahead and take the bike for a ride down the street and back and test to see if that clutch adjustment made a big difference. Okay, so we just got back from a quick ride down the road and back. Everything seems to work real good. So overall, everything's done. We changed our oil, we changed our oil filter, we changed our transmission fluid, we changed our primary fluid. We also replaced all of the plug O-rings with brand new ones, and replaced all of the fluids and made our final clutch adjustment, and now everything's good to go. So now I'll go ahead and mark this down in my book that I did all of that today. So now I'm all good for a while, and now we can get back out on the road and enjoy that open road, which is what this beast is made for. Okay, everybody, so there you go. So again, this was not a very hard job to do. I typically like to change all of my fluids all at once. It's just a little bit easier that way for me. So if I'm gonna get down and dirty and get it done, I'm just gonna do all three at the same time. But I definitely recommend trying to do it yourself because you're going to save a ton of money. It's not that expensive. Again, most of these fluids I use today are about $8 a quart. So you need a little over 3 quarts for your oil, you need 1 quart for your transmission, and you need 1 quart for your primary. You might want to invest in a new gasket for your primary cover if you can. I definitely recommend buying some of the rubber O-rings because it's always good to have those, because every time you change your fluids, just go ahead and replace your O-rings as well. They're very cheap, very inexpensive, and I'll put a link in the description of where I got mine. So overall, that's it for today's video. I hope this video helps some of you out. If you're thinking about trying to take on changing your fluids or adjusting your clutch on your own, I hope this video helps some of you. So do me a favor, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, like this video. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments section and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And also do me a favor, subscribe to the channel because it definitely helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. So that's it. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. I truly appreciate you all. Thank you. And as always, see you in the next video.